Hello and welcome to Follow That Female. Have you ever considered becoming an entrepreneur? Do you know what's involved? And more importantly, would it be a good fit for you? So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Christine Kelly, who's a very successful entrepreneur. Christine founded Little Kickers in London following the birth of her son in 2002. The company sold its first franchise in 2004 and currently operates through a network of over 330 franchisees in 33 countries. Little Kickers has won a number of international franchising awards globally and was also recognized as one of Entrepreneur Magazine's top global franchises from 2016 to 2020, winning the title of overall champion at the 2020 Global Franchise Awards. Also on a personal level, Christine was awarded an Honorary Doctorate in Business Administration by Aston University in 2019. Aston being one of the top ranked business universities worldwide. So Christine, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about Little Kickers, just how the company came about and what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I founded Little Kickers in London, as you said, back in 2002. At the time, I'd just finished working, I was working with JP Morgan on their graduate scheme, working very, very long hours, but I'd had my son 2 years earlier and hadn't really got to spend as much time with him as I might have liked. So I decided that I needed to make a bit of a change and come up with a way of, I guess, a better work-life balance. So potentially set up a business myself where I could spend a bit more time with my son as he grew up. And Little Kickers evolved into that business. I started it up just with a tiny little class for him and his friends to see if, I spotted a niche in the market. No one else was running classes for kids of that age to learn to play football. And it got oversubscribed, the pilot, by about 400%. So I thought, actually, I might not have to go back to banking. I might be able to do this instead. So it grew really quickly. First year, we had about 35 hours of classes operating. And then by kind of midway through 2006, 2004, I'd got to the point where I was spending so many hours working on the business that I was starting to not see that much of my son again. So I decided at that point to look for an alternative way of expanding the business, and I stumbled across franchising, and it seemed like a really excellent way of ensuring that the quality of what the program that I developed was maintained, but also expanding it on a kind of bigger scale. So that was mine.
Okay, so I mean, today Little Kickers is pretty huge worldwide in terms of classes for kids of many ages for soccer, football training. So you must be pretty busy. So what does a typical day look like for you?
It's actually changed completely over the past year. I think, like a lot of people, the pandemic's completely turned my life upside down. So about a year ago, I was still very much involved in the day-to-day running of the business. This is kind of just pre-pandemic. Business is going brilliantly. We're expanding really nicely, and the team doing a phenomenal job. Then the lockdown came. At that particular point in time, as I said, I was kind of, I dropped the kids off at school, get to work, work pretty long hours, while the kids were out at school, then start up again in the evenings and do calls with franchisees overseas and things like that. But then when lockdown hit, all that changed. And it kind of coincided with my youngest child going off to university. So I had less to do around the house, kind of, ferrying her to and from volleyball practices and things like that. And I was able to focus more on the business. But actually, at that particular point in time, due to the lockdown, a lot of our classes got shut down around the world. And we had to make a decision at that point: what could we do best from a head office point of view to help our franchisees when they weren't actually able to run classes? So we decided to focus quite heavily on customer engagement and to make sure that when we did get up and running again, we'd still have really enthusiastic, kind of passionate customers who wanted to come back to our business. So I spent quite a bit of time during lockdown with my son, who's now 20 years old, and he's been coaching Little Kickers for quite a while. And he and I made videos so that the kids who come to our classes physically normally were able to do classes online. So I spent quite a bit of time dressed up as a lion mascot. rolling around in the garden with my son kind of coaching me how to play football. So yeah, that's how I spent a lot of lockdown, and also kind of, you know, helping with coordinating the shutdown, the reopening, the shutdown, the reopening for lots of different countries around the world, which is quite complicated. Then fast forward to a couple of months ago, both my kids were at university, and the team are doing a phenomenal job of running the business, and I've moved to Malta. I got very fed up with the kind of cold winters in Canada, and because I can run the business from anywhere, I decided to move somewhere a bit warmer. So I've been living here for the last couple of months. I'm not working as much on the day-to-day running of the business at all as I used to. The team in the UK are doing that now and doing a phenomenal job. I'm doing more kind of overall strategy and things like that, but really when it comes to the day-to-day stuff, I don't really get involved in that anymore. So my life is completely different now than it was 6 months ago, and again than it was kind of 12 months ago pre-pandemic.
Right. So you talked a little bit about what attracted you to the role of being an entrepreneur in the first place. But why do you enjoy it? What do you enjoy about that as a career choice? What about that as a lifestyle choice? What do you enjoy about it?
Yeah, I think I really like the kind of entrepreneur lifestyle because I'm quite an independent person, and I love being able to decide myself what I want to do and being in charge of my own destiny, I guess. And freedom is probably the most important thing to me. You know, I want to be able to work from wherever I want. I want to be able to work the hours that I want. And really, you know, I felt deprived when my son was first born of not being able to spend that time with him. I was working really, really long hours, like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. plus a commute on either end in the city in the UK, and didn't get to see much of my son for the first couple of years of his life. So I think I just wasn't prepared to do that anymore, and I wanted to make sure that I could live life on my own terms, I guess. So yeah, that's what I really love about being an entrepreneur, kind of being in charge of my own destiny, being able to work from anywhere I want to, really.
So flexibility, independence.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So bearing that in mind, what kind of people do you think would be suited to the role of an entrepreneur? Like if you had to choose some main skill sets or characteristics that would make a person successful as an entrepreneur, so that anybody that's watching this can kind of take that as a guideline, would that match my personality type? Do I have those kind of characteristics necessary to be successful as an entrepreneur? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so I think the main one would be that you would need to be quite determined. It's a really bumpy road, and there's a lot of ups and downs. And you know, there are times when I've thought, oh God, I just want to throw it all in and give up. But I think being the kind of person who doesn't give up and who just keeps on going, no matter what's thrown at them, is kind of a helpful characteristic. I think you need to be quite comfortable with risk. So I don't love risk, but I'm quite comfortable with calculated risks. So whenever there's a situation where I think, right, you know, is this a sensible approach? It's slightly risky. It's not, you know, staying within the confines of what we normally do. Should we do it? I always try and think, well, actually, if we do take that route, what's the worst thing that could happen? And if I'm comfortable with the worst thing that could happen, then I will take that risk and move ahead with it. Right. So I think if you're quite comfortable with risk, I think the final thing is you probably need to be, I would say, quite a versatile person. So particularly when you first start a business, you're the person doing all the marketing, the finance, the sales, you know, everything. And you need to be reasonably comfortable with just having a stab at things, even if you don't really 100% exactly know how to do them.
Right. So you mentioned determination there as one of the main characteristics that are necessary for an entrepreneur. So what were the main challenges or obstacles that you came up against that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think the first one, and I've actually heard lots of other female entrepreneurs say the same thing, but it's the whole imposter syndrome thing where you kind of think, God, no one's really trained me on how to do the job that I'm doing or set up the company I'm setting up. Like I knew absolutely nothing about football. I'd never really run my own business. And you know, I certainly knew nothing about franchising when I set up Little Kickers. But I think it's kind of realizing that you can learn all of this stuff, particularly nowadays with the internet. There's like so many resources out there. And actually, if you go to the trouble of learning this stuff, then you're just as qualified as anybody else to do it a lot of the time. So it's kind of overcoming that imposter syndrome. A second thing, I think this is more of a thing that's tricky if you move from a corporate job into running your own business, is that you don't really get any feedback. So I make quite a big effort to, you know, tell my team that they're doing a really good job and make sure that they know they're doing things right and everything else. But as the entrepreneur, you don't really have anyone saying, oh, well done. You know, you've done a really nice job on you know, writing the article or whatever it is that you're doing that day. So I think the kind of lack of feedback is quite difficult. You just got to kind of be the kind of person who'll just plow on anyway, whether you get feedback or not. And then I think the third thing I'd say is over time it becomes a little bit lonely, because ultimately you're responsible for the success of the company, and you can kind of, once the business gets to the point where it's quite big, you can get to the point where you're kind of back to the whole us and them mentality that you may have in normal corporate life, but you're the them all of a sudden, because the business has grown to that size, not necessarily because you've changed as a person or you've changed your outlook or the way that you're running the company. So I think that's quite difficult. It can be quite lonely from that perspective.
Right, right. So if you had any tips for the people that are watching with regards to just life in general, successful tips that have helped you along the way, would you be open to sharing your wisdom on some of those?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think from a perspective of somebody who's considering setting up their own business, I think first thing I'd say is don't give up. Like, if you decide you're going to do it, test the market, make sure that the financial model works. If that's all good, then just do it. Just don't even give yourself the option of changing your mind. Plow on and just get on and do it, but realize that it's a roller coaster. And you know, every other entrepreneur I know, we all talk about the roller coaster ride, and it is. Some days you think, oh my God, it's the most fantastic thing ever. I'm so happy I set this up. And then the next day you can be like, oh, why did I even bother? This is a disaster. And it is a complete roller coaster, and you need to just be able to recognize that that's going to be the case and just not give up and plow on with it.
Right.
The next thing from an entrepreneur's perspective is, I think what's the worst that could happen mentality kind of when you're approaching risk is quite a helpful thing to do. So not being scared of doing things differently or thinking of different approaches to things if you're comfortable with the worst case scenario. And then I think the other thing that's kind of been helpful to me is we've had a lot of situations with the business where you just, you know, things don't go according to plan and you just think, oh my God, it's a massive disaster. But actually, if you can look at that with a different set of eyes and kind of fresh perspective, and actually, you know, that could happen to anybody else as well. But what can we do to solve this that kind of, you know, sets us above everybody else? And so I guess it's kind of having that sense of creativity and problem solving ability is quite important, because definitely not everything is going to go according to plan. And it's good if you're the kind of person who's a bit creative around solutions. I think for life in general, because I think that was the second part of your question, I'd say, yeah, it's really important just to be nice to people and be nice to everybody. So whether it's your boss or, you know, the person who's bringing you a cup of coffee in a restaurant or whatever, I think it's really goes a long way just to be nice to people and treat them fairly and treat them well. I think the second thing I would say is, if you're not happy with the way things are going in your life, work out why they're not going in the way you want and how you would like them to go, and then set about changing them. Don't be dictated to as to the life you should lead by other people's expectations. You should be able to choose your own life and get on with it and do what you want to do. And then I think the final thing is, it's I think a good thing to always try and go above and beyond. So don't just try and scrape by doing like the minimum necessary work. If you are the person who actually will take things that little bit further and just try that little bit harder to help other people, people remember that and they appreciate it. And I think it gets you a lot further in life than just you know, thinking, oh, what's the least amount of work I can get away with doing on this. So that would be my third point.
Christine, some brilliant advice. Thank you so much for your insight. That was a real pleasure speaking with you. Have an awesome day. I'll include the little kickers information down below. And for everyone viewing out there, if you enjoyed the content and the insight into this particular career choice or profession or lifestyle, then please like below and subscribe. Thanks, and see you soon. Thanks, Christine.